Sometimes the best moves a championship organization makes aren't the players they acquire, but the ones they're smart enough to let go before the damage becomes irreversible. The Los Angeles Lakers made a decision 60 days ago that had half the fan base questioning Rob Pelinka's judgment, a move that looked questionable in the moment, but is now revealing itself as one of the most validated roster decisions in recent franchise history. Welcome to Lakers News Fan Report, your trusted source for breaking updates, comprehensive analysis, and insider perspectives on every decision shaping the Los Angeles Lakers' championship pursuit. This is where you receive daily information on roster construction, trade deadline strategy, player development, and the moves that separate contenders from pretenders in the Western Conference. Today, I'm examining a situation that's unfolding in Dallas right now, a complete disaster involving a former Laker that serves as a masterclass in why sometimes the hardest decisions are the right ones, and why our front office deserves credit for recognizing a problem before it cost us another season. The Los Angeles Lakers are currently positioned as one of the more intriguing teams in the Western Conference playoff race, playing competitive basketball under J.J. Redick's first-year coaching system and showing encouraging signs that this roster has legitimate upside when healthy and executing properly. We're seeing Anthony Davis dominate on both ends of the floor with MVP-caliber production. We're watching Austin Reaves continue his development into a reliable third scoring option, and we're benefiting from the veteran leadership and basketball IQ that LeBron James still provides even at this stage of his legendary career. The chemistry is improving, the defensive rotations are tightening up, and most importantly, we're playing with an identity and purpose that was missing for stretches of last season. But rewind the clock back to December 2024, and the narrative around this team was significantly different. We were struggling with consistency issues, our backcourt rotation wasn't clicking the way we needed it to, and there were legitimate questions about whether this roster construction could compete with the elite teams in the West. Rob Pelinka faced enormous pressure to make a move that would address our needs without mortgaging the future, to find that perfect balance between competing now with LeBron while also protecting our long-term flexibility as we eventually transition into the post-LeBron era. The decision he made was controversial. It was questioned by a significant portion of the fan base, but it was ultimately the right call. The Lakers traded D'Angelo Russell in December 2024 as part of the package that brought Dorian Finney-Smith to Los Angeles. That transaction represented more than just swapping one player for another. It was a philosophical statement about what this organization values and what types of players fit our championship blueprint. Russell had been with the franchise during a critical stretch. He'd contributed to our Western Conference Finals run in 2023, and he had genuine fans among the Lakers faithful who believed in his talent and potential. But the front office saw something that not everyone wanted to acknowledge. Russell's limitations were becoming more pronounced. His inconsistency was a liability we couldn't afford, and his defensive shortcomings were exploited repeatedly in playoff situations. The relationship between D'Angelo Russell and the Los Angeles Lakers organization has been complicated from the very beginning, stretching all the way back to 2015 when we selected him with the second overall pick in the NBA draft. That selection came during one of the darkest periods in franchise history, the post-Kobe rebuilding years, where we were searching desperately for any sign of hope that could restore the Lakers to championship relevance. Russell showed flashes of brilliance as a rookie, demonstrating the court vision and scoring ability that made him a lottery pick. But he also displayed troubling inconsistency and maturity issues that raised questions about his long-term fit with the organization. By 2017, just 2 years after drafting him, the Lakers had seen enough to make the difficult decision of moving on. We packaged Russell in the trade that brought us Brook Lopez and the draft pick that became Kyle Kuzma, effectively admitting that our second overall selection hadn't worked out as planned. That first stint with the Lakers ended unceremoniously, and Russell embarked on a journey that would take him to Brooklyn, then Golden State, then Minnesota, before eventually circling back to Los Angeles in 2023. That return felt like a redemption story at the time, an opportunity for Russell to prove he'd matured and developed into the player the Lakers always hoped he could become. Russell's second tenure with the Lakers produced genuinely positive moments that deserve acknowledgement. During our 2023 playoff run that culminated in the Western Conference Finals, he provided critical scoring punch and playmaking that helped us navigate through a competitive Western Conference bracket. His ability to create his own shot, to knock down clutch three-pointers in pressure moments, and to facilitate for others when defenses collapsed on LeBron and AD gave us a legitimate third option that many playoff teams lack. Those performances reminded everyone why Russell was once an all-star, why teams continued to believe in his talent despite the inconsistency that has defined his career. But playoff basketball has a way of exposing weaknesses that regular season success can mask. Russell's defensive limitations became glaring problems when matched against elite backcourts in 7-game series. His shooting percentages fluctuated wildly from game to game, making him unreliable as a consistent scoring threat when we needed production most. The mental side of his game showed cracks in high-pressure situations, with unforced turnovers and poor shot selection appearing at the worst possible times. And perhaps most frustratingly, there was never any indication that these issues would improve with time or experience. They were fundamental aspects of who Russell was as a player. The Lakers' front office spent months evaluating whether Russell could be the long-term answer at the point guard position, whether his strengths outweighed his weaknesses in a championship equation. That evaluation process wasn't rushed or emotional. It was a comprehensive assessment that considered statistical production, film study, advanced metrics, and conversations with coaching staff about what they needed from that position. The conclusion they reached, while painful for some fans to accept, was clear. D'Angelo Russell's ceiling as a player wouldn't elevate this team to championship level, and keeping him meant accepting mediocrity at a position where championship teams typically have an advantage. When the opportunity arose to trade Russell for Dorian Finney-Smith in December 2024, Pelinka pulled the trigger despite knowing it would generate controversy. Finney-Smith brought exactly what the Lakers needed: versatile defensive ability, three-point shooting that spaces the floor properly, and the willingness to embrace a role without demanding high-usage numbers. He wasn't the flashy move that generates ESPN headlines. He wasn't the all-star name that excites casual fans, but he was the right basketball fit for what this team required, and most importantly, moving Russell removed a player whose limitations were becoming increasingly problematic as we attempted to compete at the highest level. D'Angelo Russell signed with the Dallas Mavericks during the offseason, joining a franchise that desperately needed playmaking and backcourt creation after losing key contributors from their previous season's roster. The Mavericks sold themselves on the idea that Russell could be revitalized in their system, that playing alongside Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving would take pressure off him and allow his skills to flourish. Dallas guaranteed him a role and an opportunity, betting that the talent that made him an all-star years ago could still be accessed if placed in the right situation. That optimism has crashed spectacularly into reality over the past few months. Russell's performance in Dallas has been nothing short of disastrous, confirming every concern that the Lakers identified during their evaluation process. Through the first 15 games of the season, he averaged just 11.9 points, 4.9 assists, 2.8 rebounds, and half a steal in 22 minutes per game. Those numbers represent the lowest scoring average and minutes per game of his entire NBA career, a stunning regression for someone who's supposed to be in his prime years. The efficiency numbers tell an even grimmer story. 38% shooting from the field and an abysmal 22.7% on three-point attempts, percentages that make him virtually unplayable in competitive games. The advanced metrics paint a picture of a player who's actively hurting his team when he's on the court. Russell currently has negative value over replacement player, meaning Dallas would literally be better off playing a minimum salary player from the end of their bench instead of him. His win shares per 48 minutes are in the red, indicating his contributions aren't translating to team success in any measurable way. Defensively, he remains a liability that opposing teams target relentlessly, running actions specifically designed to get their best scorers matched up against him. And perhaps most damning, the Mavericks have relegated him to a bench role despite their desperate need for backcourt production, essentially admitting the signing was a mistake. Dallas finds itself in an organizational crisis, largely of its own making, sitting with a losing record and headed toward lottery territory after entering the season with playoff expectations. The decision to sign Russell to a $5.6 million contract now looks like an unforced error that's contributing to their struggles, taking up roster space and salary cap room that could have been used more productively. The Mavericks are over the first apron in luxury tax calculations, limiting their flexibility to make corrective moves, and they're facing years of difficulty digging out from the financial commitments they've made. Trading Russell before the February 5th deadline has become a priority, but finding a team willing to take him will prove extraordinarily challenging. The historical context of Russell's career makes the Dallas disaster less surprising than it might initially appear. He's now been traded 5 times during his NBA journey, including twice by the Lakers organization. That level of organizational movement isn't normal for a player with all-star credentials. It's a red flag that suggests consistent issues preventing teams from viewing him as a long-term solution. Every franchise that's acquired Russell has eventually reached the same conclusion. His limitations outweigh his contributions when you're trying to compete for championships. The talent is real. The flashes of brilliance are genuine. But the consistency and reliability required for sustained success has never materialized. Lakers fans watching Russell's struggles in Dallas have understandably felt vindicated in the franchise's decision to move on when they did. The temptation to engage in schadenfreude is real, to point at his failures and say, "We told you so," about his shortcomings. But the more productive perspective is recognizing that our front office made a difficult evaluation correctly, identifying a problem before it became unsolvable, and executing a trade that improved our roster construction. That type of proactive management is what separates championship organizations from mediocre ones, the willingness to make tough calls even when they're unpopular in the moment. The question that's now circulating among some corners of Lakers social media is whether we should consider bringing Russell back if Dallas makes him available for minimal cost before the trade deadline. That inquiry, while understandable given our history with the player, reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of why we traded him in the first place. The issues that made Russell a poor fit for the Lakers haven't disappeared just because he's struggling in Dallas. They've actually become more pronounced and obvious. His shooting has gotten worse, his defensive limitations remain unchanged, and his consistency problems have reached career-worst levels. There is absolutely zero basketball justification for reacquiring a player who's currently putting up the worst numbers of his entire career. Rob Pelinka will be aggressive and active as the February trade deadline approaches, exploring every possible avenue to improve this roster and give ourselves the best chance to compete in the playoffs. That activity won't include kicking the tires on a D'Angelo Russell reunion because that ship has sailed permanently. The Lakers learned their lessons about Russell across 2 separate stints with the organization, accumulating enough data points to reach a definitive conclusion about his fit within our championship timeline. Bringing him back would represent organizational malpractice, ignoring everything we've learned and repeating mistakes we've already made twice before. Russell will likely finish this season either on a rebuilding team that claims him off waivers or buried at the end of a contender's bench, where his minutes are extremely limited. Dallas is desperately trying to package him in larger trades, potentially a salary filler in deals for their star players as they pivot toward a full rebuild and the Cooper Flag timeline. But finding takers will be difficult because every team in the league has access to the same film and statistics that make Russell such an obvious negative asset. His contract expires after this season, providing teams some short-term flexibility, but even that modest salary feels like an overpay for the production he's currently providing. The Lakers are in a much better position now than we would be if we'd kept Russell and tried to make things work for another season. Austin Reeves has solidified himself as a core piece of our future, taking on increased responsibility and showing he can handle high-pressure moments. Our defensive identity has improved without having to constantly hide a liability on that end of the floor. And the roster flexibility we gained by moving Russell's contract has opened possibilities for other moves that better serve our championship timeline. Every metric suggests we made the right call, even if it took a few months for that reality to become undeniable. My honest assessment as someone who wants nothing but championship banners hanging in the rafters is that the D'Angelo Russell chapter of Lakers history is closed permanently. We gave him 2 separate opportunities to prove he belonged in purple and gold. We saw the best version of his game during our playoff run, and we also saw the limitations that prevented him from being the player we needed. The front office made the correct decision in moving on. Dallas is learning the same lessons we already learned, and there's no reason to revisit a failed experiment when we have more productive paths forward. I want to hear your genuine thoughts on the D'Angelo Russell situation and whether you're glad the Lakers moved on when we did. Do you think we made the right decision trading him last December, or do you believe we gave up on him too quickly? Were you someone who wanted us to keep Russell and give him more time, and if so, has watching his Dallas disaster changed your perspective? And what do you remember most about his 2 stints with the Lakers, the positive moments or the frustrating limitations? Drop your detailed opinions in the comments below, because this is a conversation that matters for how we evaluate our front office's decision-making. If this analysis gave you real insight into why the Lakers were right to move on from D'Angelo Russell and why a reunion makes 0 sense, make sure you're subscribed to Lakers News Fan Report and hit that notification bell. I bring you daily coverage of every roster decision, every trade possibility, and every development that impacts our championship pursuit. This is where you get honest, informed perspectives backed by statistical analysis rather than emotional reactions. Smash that like button, share with every Lakers fan you know, and let's keep this crucial conversation going as we approach the trade deadline. Lake Show!